Yeah, so traditional robots were, born in the automotive world where the factories needed some machine that could do repetitive work year after year, basically putting cars together, which was mostly heavy work and very repetitive work. And out of that need came the industrial robot, which popped up. There were industrial robot companies popping up around the world near the automotive factories. So in the US, Germany, and Japan mostly, there were these industrial robot companies that popped up and created robot arms that catered to the need for these automotive factories. And in that industry, you can say you can plan ahead quite a lot. You're going to build this model for a number of years, and you can plan to build a factory. You can have all the engineers and electrical staff in there to set up the whole line and create that, and then have the factory running for a number of years until you switch to a new model. So that the technology developed for that was good at that. It's good at doing these kind of long product life cycles, very predictable. The setup time can be months to years, months to a year, and then the production is running like clockwork, you can say, for many years. But there is a need that's not catered by this kind of robot, which is you could say more flexible production, typical small companies or companies that have a shorter product life cycle than the automotive companies do. And we could see there was a potential to make such a robot that catered more to that need than the traditional industrial robots. And we call that, you could say, a flexible robot, or a collaborative robot was the word that came out of that. So a collaborative robot is a robot that's easier to install than a traditional robot. It's you could say it's safe to be around, because if you add in safety to the robot, then you don't need all the fences. And you can have fences, but the fences actually make it harder to install the robot, because you need to rearrange the floor space, and it can become very, you can say, time consuming and complicated to retrofit existing manufacturing lines with robots if you have to build huge cages around them. So there is the actual weight of the robot is light. There is some built-in safety, and then the robot should also be so easy to program and operate that you don't need highly trained robot programmers every time you need to do a small adjustment of your processes. So that's the idea behind the collaborative robot, which was not called the collaborative robot when we started the company, Universal Robots, but it kind of became this global industry we now call collaborative robots.
Right. It's amazing how it's really progressed, even from the time that, this vision came to light, and, you've continued on with the different differences and the changes. So what were those early days like when you were first thinking of the vision of collaborative robots, and then, putting it into place, and where we are today with Universal Robots and everyone else?
I mean, it has been quite a journey, as you can imagine. I mean, we started three guys actually. Two of us quit our jobs and went full time into Universal Robots, and we spent some years in the basement of the university, tinkering and building this robot that we thought was what a robot should be like, to cater this need of flexibility, flexible manufacturing. We seriously considered just sleeping in the office every night, because that would save us the time to go back and forth to work, and we worked a lot. And we still managed to use all our money. Naively, we thought that we could just, build a robot, sell it, get money, build a better robot, sell it, get money. But of course, we needed, some bigger investment than that to get going. And at some point, we had to realize we needed to get the investors on board. And the investors, that was after 3 years roughly. So they looked at us. We were nerds, and they said, you need a professional management. So you get a CEO in who has commercial competences, and at that time we actually did have a product that we knew was the right product, because we had managed to bring it out to a local, it was a greenhouse here where we live, and set it up and get it running in 4 hours, which we knew we couldn't do with the traditional robots. I mean, we had it in the trunk of our car, we just set it up, and it was kind of working very, very quickly. So we knew we had the technology that kind of could do what we wanted a robot to be able to do. but we didn't have the financial means to get going, and then we, you can say, transitioned the company to become a more professional, business-driven company at that stage, and so that timing was good. Then we started selling robots. First, I think 12 the first year, then something like 100, and so on. And we managed to triple or double, quadruple the number of robots sold every year for many years in a row. And also we more than doubled the staff every year for something like 8 years in a row. So it was very explosive growth, and yeah, it was a crazy time. And we also, you can say, at the beginning we didn't compete with anybody else. We kind of had this space to our own. Nobody really knew what it was. But as this term collaborative robots began to be more commonly known, then it became more legitimate industry. You can say we were starting and leading, and there were also a lot of competitors popping up, building robots like this. And we now know there are something like 150 competing products to this kind of robot we've started. So it has been, you can say, quite a journey all the way through. And when I left the company March last year, we were, you know, a kind of a big company, many hundreds of employees, 26 offices around the world, and a very different thing from what we started. So it has been quite a journey all the way through.
It really, I can imagine those early days, and now just, seeing, even in the short amount of time that I've known about Universal Robots, about close to 5 years. I remember when I first started learning about it, and you started to see more of the presentations going on at the conferences and at the exhibitions. It was very different. And all the larger, like the industrial robotic companies, then they jumped in at some point, of course, to, have an option there too. So it really is been such a short amount of time, and what we've seen change-wise. So I guess, what was that aha moment that you all had when you knew that you were doing something that was going to change the robotic world and change really the world as we see it?
Oh, but I think we when we had the first prototype out and we managed to set it up in a few hours, we could really see how this could mean a big deal to a lot of companies, because many companies had the need for automation, but they didn't have the, you can say, the time horizon to invest in big heavy automation equipment. They needed something lighter and easier to adjust and set up. So quite early we could see it, but the question was, how could we convince investors? Could we convince partners and industry around the world that they also needed this? And that was, of course, a slower process, but pretty early on we could actually see that we were onto something big here. So I guess when the world realized it is, I mean, was this term collaborative robot, when that popped up, then suddenly there was a new legitimate category of robots out there. And I think that's really what made the world realize that was something new happening. And that was several years after we realized it. The word collaborative robot, I think, comes from the robot's safety standard. So there's we didn't invent the word collaborative robot, but I think it comes from the robot safety standard, where there is a clause for collaborative operation or collaborative mode for traditional industrial robots. So the word collaborative robot is probably a robot that's intended for collaborative operation always. I think that's the meaning of the word and where it came from.
Interesting. So it was already a defined term with the industrial robotics in it, sort of segued its way over to you all, and it became a cobot.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say that we didn't, there's been a lot of talk about safety and not safety, and what is a safe robot and so on. Actually, safety was never our primary thing when we started Universal Robots. It was all about the flexibility of the robot, like who can operate it, who can set it up. And then out of that comes that we need it to be safe. But safety is not the primary thing for a collaborative robot. It is the flexibility, if you ask me. So the word cobot came from the safety standard because that was the closest we had to any definition of that kind of robot. And since it was a safety standard, it was only concerned about safety. But I think the key to a collaborative robot is really the ease of use, the flexible redeployment, and the easy programmability of the machine.
Yeah, that really makes sense. And so many new applications and new processes have come out of this where no one really thought about those before. And that's happening almost daily, where we have new ways of using the collaborative robots, even outside of the manufacturing operation.
Yes, we've seen some crazy applications also. And that's interesting for, you can say, me as one of the founders of Universal Robots. It's very interesting to see what you have created doing something you never imagined it could do. And that's a very, so you can say, almost a humbling experience to see all the creativity that we have spurred with this machine or this tool that we have created.
I can imagine. I actually want one here in my home to make pizzas. And that's one of the most interesting is it's funny to see the ones that are actually making pizzas. And, then you've got, of course, a lot of the conferences and the bartending. So it's kind of funny. But the big thing that I see is, what they've been able to utilize during COVID and a lot of the uses there and the increase with life sciences. And I guess that's a big piece of when you actually left Universal Robots, like you mentioned, and you've started your own company and you're doing a lot with that, with COVID, and your company is Reinvest Robotics, correct?
Yes. So one of the latest companies we have started in Reinvest Robotics is called Lifeline Robotics, which is a robot that can do the swabbing for COVID. So it's a way to get, you can say, nurses out of the way of the virus and also away from doing repetitive work day in and day out, like we know from the factories. So they should, of course, work more like humans and take care of the human needs of the patients, where it makes a lot of sense to have robots do the more mechanistic processes and also be the ones that are in risk of getting infection, because of course they cannot get infected. So it makes a lot of sense, I think, to do that kind of work with the robots. It's of course one step closer to you can say to being too close to a human. I mean, putting a stick of cotton into a human is
Right.
kind of scary, scary for a lot of people to have a robot do that. But on the other hand, if we can do it more gently and so on, then nurses can do it. Then there is it makes a lot of sense. And so that's one of the challenges in this company, is to try to make a very user-friendly experience where a robot is actually, you could say, crossing your bodily boundaries with this cotton stick and doing the swab for the virus. That's a challenge, but it's I think it's a good worthwhile endeavor, a thing to try, because it's the right thing to do. I mean, we want a lot of testing happening. It shouldn't be humans standing day in and day out and doing that kind of testing. And robots cannot get infected.
Right.